It's just a number on a calendar. A Friday like any other. And yet, flights go unbooked. Hotels skip the floor. People hesitate just for a second before making plans. No one can quite agree on where the fear began. Some say it started with a betrayal at a long table. Others point to an arrest that rewrote history. And some swear it's older than either of those stories, stitched into religion, folklore, and superstition itself. What's strange isn't that people used to fear Friday the 13th. It's that we still do. Even in a world of science and calendars and logic, this one date manages to unsettle us, quietly, irrationally, and all at once. So tonight, we're asking a simple question. Why does Friday the 13th still feel cursed? Welcome to A Little Bit Cursed. This is a spooky podcast where we talk about mysteries, urban legends, and the little things that make the world feel just slightly off. Today's episode is a bonus one. Something a little lighter, a little eerie, and very on brand, because it felt wrong not to talk about Friday the 13th on Friday the 13th. This isn't a true crime episode, so no heavy details, just curiosity, superstition, and why some days feel cursed before they even begin. So get comfortable. It's about to get strange. Now, personally, 13 is my lucky number, and maybe that's partly why I'm a little bit cursed, but long before the number 13 became tangled up in superstition, Friday itself already had a bad reputation. In many Western traditions, Friday was associated with endings, punishment, and loss rather than celebration or renewal. In Christian belief, Friday is traditionally the day of the crucifixion of Jesus. Because of that, it became symbolically linked with suffering, grief, and death. For centuries, Christians treated Fridays as solemn days of fasting, repentance, and restraint. It wasn't a day to begin something new. It was a day to reflect or endure. That mindset bled into everyday life. People avoided weddings on Fridays. They avoided starting journeys. They avoided making major decisions. The idea was simple. If something important begins on a day marked by suffering, it may be doomed from the start. Beyond religion, folklore reinforced the fear. In medieval Europe, executions were often carried out on Fridays. So were public punishments. Over time, Friday became associated not just with death, but with public death. Something witnessed, something meant to serve as a warning. Sailors, too, were deeply superstitious. Many believed it was bad luck to begin a voyage on a Friday, especially a long one. Some maritime folklore even claimed that ships launched on Fridays were cursed from the moment they touched the water. Whether or not these stories were true, it didn't really matter. The belief alone was enough to shape the behavior. And then there's one historical moment that cemented Friday's dark reputation even further. On Friday, October 13th, 1307, King Philip IV of France ordered the mass arrest of the Knights Templar. Thousands were imprisoned, tortured, and later executed after being accused of heresy. The event sent shockwaves through medieval Europe and became one of the most infamous betrayals in history. For many people, that date felt like proof. Friday wasn't just symbolically unlucky, it acted unlucky, and it was unlucky. By the time modern calendars took shape, Friday was already a day people approached with caution. It carried emotional weight, grief, danger endings, even those who couldn't explain exactly why. So when the number 13, already feared for its associations with imbalance and betrayal, landed on a Friday, it didn't create a new superstition. It completed one that already existed. When you put Friday and 13 together, it creates a date that already feels like it's breaking a rule, even if we can't explain which one. The fear of the number 13 didn't appear out of nowhere. It slowly formed over centuries, built on symbolism, structure, and storytelling. One of the earliest reasons comes down to order. For a long time, 12 was considered complete. number across many cultures. There's 12 months in a year, 12 hours on a clock, 2 times, 12 zodiac signs, and there's 12 Olympian gods in Greek mythology. There's also 12 tribes of Israel and 12 apostles. 12 represented balance and wholeness. So when you add one more, 13, it disrupts that balance. It's the number after completion, and historically that made people uneasy. 13 didn't fit neatly into systems people trusted. And when you just come down to the basic biology, we like neat and complete. One of the most commonly cited origins comes from Christian tradition. At the Last Supper, there were 13 people at the table, Jesus and the 12 apostles. Judas, the betrayer, is traditionally considered the 13th to arrive. Whether or not that detail is historically accurate, the symbolism stuck. 13 became associated with betrayal, loss, and catastrophe. Similar ideas show up in Norse mythology, where a dinner party of gods was disrupted when a 13th guest arrived, Loki, leading to chaos and death. Again, it's not about proof, it's about storytelling that shaped a belief. In numerology and folklore, 13 gained a reputation as a number that breaks the structure, it disrupts harmony, and it invites the unexpected. This is why many buildings still skip the 13th floor, and they also avoid labeling rooms or rows as 13. Over time, avoidance has reinforced belief, and if everyone treats a number like it's dangerous, it starts to feel like it actually is. By the 19th century, fear of the number 13 was common enough to have a name. Triskaidekaphobia, the fear of 13. I'm so sorry if I did not pronounce that correctly. Newspapers and popular culture amplified it. People began tracking misfortunes that happened on the 13th, and once people started looking at patterns, they found them. Not because the number caused harm, but because humans are very good at noticing what they expect to see. It is so easy to trick your brain into thinking something. It's actually kind of scary how easily you can do it. The number 13 stayed unlucky because it became shared knowledge. You don't have to believe in it to recognize it, and you don't have to fear it to hesitate. But once something lives in a collective memory, it doesn't need proof anymore. It just needs repetition. Now I kind of want to talk about how did it become a thing? What's interesting is that Friday the 13th hasn't always been feared. The idea really started gaining traction in the late 1800s and early 1900s when newspaper and popular culture began leaning into it. Once people started talking about it, they started watching for things to go wrong. And when something did go wrong, it stuck. Because our brains love patterns, even when we create them ourselves. Here's the thing. Humans are incredible at finding meaning, even where there might not be any. So on Friday the 13th, we notice bad luck more, and we remember negative events more clearly. And we also connect unrelated things. I even remember some Friday the 13th from when I was a kid, and I definitely bought into that belief. If something goes wrong on a normal Tuesday, we shrug it off. If it happens on Friday the 13th, it feels confirmed. Superstitions don't usually start because something is proven. They start because something felt meaningful one time and people remembered it. At their core, superstitions are a way humans try to explain uncertainty. Before science, psychology, and statistics, people relied on patterns. And what happened before something bad? What seemed to prevent it? What felt safe to repeat? If someone broke a mirror and later experienced loss, the mirror became the cause. If someone avoided a certain action and nothing bad happened, the avoidance became protection. Over time, those connections have hardened into belief. So throwing salt over your shoulder, don't walk underneath a ladder, don't open an umbrella inside, those types of things. Superstitions spread because they're easy to remember and they're easy to pass on. Stories like my grandma always said, this happened once when I didn't, they don't need proof. They need repetition. Once a belief is shared socially, it becomes part of a culture instead of logic. And I'll be honest, it took me a long time to actually step on a crack because I didn't want to break my mom's back. What's interesting is that many people who say they don't believe in superstitions, they still hesitate. They'll say things like, I don't really believe in it, but that pause says everything. Superstitions live in the space between logic and instinct. They don't need belief to work. They just need us to wonder what if. At the end of the day, superstitions aren't always about fear. Sometimes they're about comfort, routine, continuity, feeling like the world follows some kind of rule, even a made-up one. They give shape to uncertainty, and maybe that's why even now we keep them around. Because even if Friday the 13th is considered unlucky, in a way, it still kind of makes us feel safe because it's a pattern. One thing that I personally love, but are considered unlucky, are black cats. But here's the thing, black cats weren't always unlucky. In some cultures, they were actually seen as protective or lucky. The bad reputation mostly comes from medieval Europe. During the Middle Ages, black cats became associated with witchcraft. People believed witches could transform into black cats, or that black cats were familiars. Those are supernatural companions. This fear intensified during periods of religious panic and plague. Anything dark, mysterious, or hard to see at night became suspect. Ironically, this superstition had real consequences. Black cats were killed in large numbers, which may have contributed to the rat population growing, which ended up worsening the spread of the disease. So the idea of black cats being unlucky wasn't about the cats at all. It was about fear, control, and misunderstanding. Also, why is walking under a ladder considered bad luck? This one actually starts with practical safety. In earlier centuries, ladders were unstable. Tools or paint could fall. Walking underneath was genuinely dangerous. And over time, a safety rule became a superstition. There's also a symbolic layer. A ladder leaning against a wall forms a triangle. Triangles were seen as sacred or significant. Breaking that shape or walking through it was an invite to misfortune. So that begins as, don't do that, or you could get hurt. And it turns into, don't do that, something bad will happen. Now, why do people throw salt over their shoulder? Salt used to be incredibly valuable. It was essential for preserving food and symbolized wealth and protection. Spilling salt wasn't just messy, it meant loss. The superstition developed as a way to counteract that loss. Throwing salt over your left shoulder was believed to ward off evil spirits, blind bad luck, and that might be lurking behind you. The left side was traditionally associated with vulnerability or darkness, so tossing salt there became a kind of ritual reset. It was a way of saying, yes, something went wrong, but I'm fixing it, don't worry. The common thread that links all of these is that none of these superstitions started randomly. They all come from the fear of the unknown, attempts to avoid harm, symbolic thinking, and turning accidents into meaning. Over time, explanation turned into ritual, and ritual turned into belief. So, whether today passes quietly, or something small goes wrong, or nothing feels different at all, Friday the 13th still does what it's always done. It makes us pause, it makes us notice, and it makes us sit with the unknown, even just for a moment. And honestly, that might be enough. Thank you so much for listening to this bonus episode of A Little Bit Cursed. If you enjoy spooky stories and quiet unease, you know where to find me. Take care of yourself today, and maybe trust your gut just a little bit.